Hello and welcome back to And Both. My guest today is Sarah Kagan. She is a grief coach, a mom of 2 little ones, and someone who left a corporate career to do work that most of us don't know how to talk about, helping people move through loss while still showing up for everything life is asking of them. Sarah lost her mom 2 years ago when she was 6 months pregnant with her second son and found herself navigating one of the most anticipated moments of her life, arriving at exactly the same time as one of the most devastating. This kind of experience sits right at the heart of this podcast, because those two things don't take turns. They just both showed up and she had to figure out how to hold them at the same time. In this conversation, we talk about what we get wrong when we try to comfort grieving people. We talk about the pressure to be strong, to be fine, to keep moving, and what it costs. We talk about rebuilding a career and an identity after loss, and we get into how workplaces ask people to leave their hardest experiences at the door and what we lose when they do. I'll share a little bit of my own experience with loss in this one as well. All right, here's Sarah. Welcome to And Both, a podcast about what it really looks like to put yourself on the list while raising kids and doing all the other things life asks of you. I'm your host, Ashley Blackington, and on this show, you'll hear conversations with moms who are figuring it out in their own ways, plus a few solo episodes from me from time to time. It's not about having all the answers, it's about sharing stories, learning from each other, and knowing we don't have to choose between either or when we're living in the middle of and both. Let's get into today's episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of the And Both podcast. My guest today is Sarah Kagan. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am excited. I'm excited to talk about something that's like the opposite of excitement usually in life. But before we get into that, how about if you let people know what you would like them to know about you?
Yeah, I am a motherless mother to 2 little friends, 4.5 and 1.5. I live in Philadelphia with my husband, and I am on a mission to revolutionize the way we talk about grief in the modern world.
I love it. You know, I've had probably, I don't know, I would say like if I had to categorize, I've had the most discussions about grief on this show. Like the people that have come on have been working in that space.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all moms working in the grief space. But also, they're the most listened to episodes by a mile.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm not
It's
surprised.
interesting because I think it's like, you know, I see these, I get served this content sometimes that are like respectfully to all the moms who are mothering out there when you still have your mother, like you don't know what's really happening. And I don't think that that's necessarily true, but I do think that women innately, especially once you have kids, really start to understand that like matriescence and that like really strong maternal bond and like maternal instincts. And so losing your mother while mothering, there's just something in there that I think even if you still have your mom, you can really relate to or empathize with how impactful motherhood is when you're in it and then reflecting on what you've had.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think that there's something that a lot of women can relate to, even if you aren't experiencing that same loss.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like also the conversations that come out of that can be sometimes about like the positive, the positive loss of it is like, this person was a positive influence in my life. And then there's also the like, this person was not a great influence in my life or all these things. And so I think there's just so much nuance to like once you cross the threshold into motherhood, it changes how you think about everything and what you experience and all of that. So I think that's just, I guess I don't know what I would have thought would be the things that people would gravitate towards, but it just seems to be the things that like we don't talk about out loud, or we talk about when we're like 10 miles down the road past it, but how do we address it in the moment? And so that's what I love. What you're doing is talking about it. You're talking about it as it's happening, and you're talking about it in the places where it is impacting you, like your job.
Yeah. I mean, my mom, the anniversary of her passing was last week, and it's only been 2 years. And so I am very much in still the early stages of what living a life with this big loss looks like. Mm-hmm. And I also have really little kids. And so I am still also in that thick of like, I'm wiping butts left and right over here, like I'm very much living it in real time and like learning the lessons in real time and to your point, I just don't know a lot of other folks who talk about that and share from that place. And that's why it was so important for me to just say, this is my real experience. And so I'm going to talk
Hmm.
about it because somebody else out there is definitely navigating what I'm navigating. And there's so much pressure to cover up or perform or just show up and be like, yeah, I'm fine. It's no big deal. But it is a big deal. And you need someone else to validate that experience for you.
Yeah, and you need there always has to be someone has to wave the flag first, right? Like
Totally.
it's not going to be a thing where all of a sudden that just becomes the reason why there's shifts in cultural conversation and beliefs and all of that comes from one person, two people, 10 people, and now all of a sudden then once it makes it into your algorithm, then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, wait a minute. This
Right.
is everywhere," but it's so easy for it to feel exactly the opposite of that forever and ever if you don't, kind of, I guess, crack the seal on that.
Totally. Well, everyone's waiting for someone else to be the first
Mhm.
is, I think what you're saying is that no one wants to be the one that's like, hey, I'm having a hard time or hey, I don't love this stage. Because if no one else is saying it, then you look like a bad mother or ungrateful or just like you're the odd man out.
Mhm.
That's a really hard position to be in. And what I have found is that once someone opens that door, people are rushing in.
Yeah.
So my DMs are flooded with people who say, thank you for sharing this. I lost my mom when I was 8 months pregnant. I never honored that. Or I had this terrible experience at work when my so and so passed away. I've never forgotten it. Thank you for talking about it. Like my experience is not unique in a lot of ways, but a lot of people just never had the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think too, the other part is that like this idea of like relative grief or something. I don't know. It's this idea of like if you always have to be grateful, you don't have the opportunity or the time to be sad.
Hmm.
And like it's we make so much space for everybody else around us. Like, it's the idea that like we are so much kinder to each other and like someone else going through the situation than we are to ourselves in that situation. Like we get into this, I should be doing this, I should be feeling this way, I should be moving in this direction. But it's all stuff that you'd never say to your friend or another
Totally.
person that's in there.
Yeah. And I know that for me in navigating, so a little bit of my background is that my mom passed away when I was 6 months pregnant with my second son. And around that time, there were so many people who were saying something to the effect of, well, at least you have a baby to bring on this joy, or at least you can focus on raising a newborn instead of your grief. And it very much sent the message of just be okay because you have to be and carry it because you have to. Similar to that is you're so brave or you're so strong, which implies that I chose this path and then was like, I'm going to go do this hard and scary thing, as opposed to this hard and scary thing just showed up in my life and I had to work through it. And there is such a narrative of martyrdom in our
Hmm.
culture that there's so much pride and power in like carrying it all, holding the mental load, doing everything yourself. And what I really learned in carrying these two huge life transitions at the same time is how unsustainable that martyrdom mentality is when you start adding on real life on top of that. And learning how to step out of that martyrdom trap is the thing that has allowed me to then be able to talk about what I've gone through and create a platform to share because I'm not trying to hold it all together and be like brave and strong anymore. I'm just being really honest and I'm asking for a lot of support and I'm giving more support too because now I have the capacity to.
Yeah. Yeah. And that too, I think that's another thing that's important to point out is like, you get into that space of like, yes, the martyrdom piece like 1,000 times. But you also get into the space of like, I don't have time for this right now. Like, we don't have time to live our life while we're living our life because we're so consumed by like all the things we haven't done, all the things we need to do, all the things we're late to do or early to do or whatever. It's just like, when do we ever have that present? Like, this is the sucky part. And it's stuff like the loss of a family member that makes time stop. Not for any length of time, but it's that like that hard check-in of, Oh, holy cow. I was so busy and moving in so many different directions. And then this happens. And then there's this massive like recalibration of, is this what I want? Is this what I don't want? And where am I going?
Yeah. And I think that can feel really panicky for folks. And that's why, there's a statistic that 51% of people who experience loss will leave their jobs within a
Mm.
year. And part of that is exactly what you said, because losing somebody and that recalibration really it can feel really panicky. What am I doing? How am I spending time? What if I died tomorrow? Oh my God, I have to, change all these things. But there's also a way then that grief invites the opportunity to take stock in a holistically new way. And instead of making these hard pivots, building in a lot more intentional routine and intentional attention into
Mhm.
your life so that you're not then faced with this holy grail of moments where somebody dies and you have to rethink everything because you get to make those choices every day. Or, I mean, let's be honest, I'm not making those choices every day. There are many days I'm still caught up in the swirl and the whatever, but I can catch myself a lot faster now and
Mhm.
say, like, actually, I'm not feeling stable in my body or in my emotional state. I'm not feeling grounded. I'm too focused on all the other stuff. Like, I'm going to take the whole afternoon and I'm going to sew and I'm going to do
Mhm.
something else. And I'm going to like really connect with myself to make sure that when I step into the next thing, it's the thing I want to be doing or, need to do, but can do it from a more resourced place than that panic or that like just auto drive.
Yeah. How about if you tell everyone a little bit about what that looks like for you because you have moved into a different space professionally
Yeah.
following all of that?
Yeah. So I quit my job, my corporate job. It'll be a year in May. And when I quit, it was really because I just could not go on. I couldn't be in my company anymore. I couldn't do the work anymore. I didn't care, didn't want to care. And I didn't quit to start grief coaching. I quit just to take time for myself. And that just quickly turned into finding the ways that were nourishing for me also happened to be in being of service in this work to other people. But I do have two little kids. I'm running a business that I'm starting from the ground up, total industry change, career path change. It's like all from the beginning. And I am still learning. But what I really try and do is I've tried to build in structure that doesn't look like 9 to 5,
Mhm.
because that's what I moved away from with intention. So I mean, we're recording on a Wednesday, but I typically don't take any calls or any meetings on Wednesdays. And those days I actually do dedicate pretty much exclusively to arts and crafts because they bring me joy and they help me feel grounded and they help me feel connected to my mom and they allow me to unplug in a way that lets my creativity, both for work and not for work, like percolate. And a lot of my ideas are birthed on those days. I sign off every day by 4 o'clock, try to, so that I can have time to go pick up my kids or start dinner or just feel more settled transitioning from work to kid life.
Mhm.
I'm at the gym 4 or 5 days a week, like early, because I also know that I need that for my body. And also, I think on a less specific, more macro level, I ask for a lot more help than I used to. Like, I will say to my husband, we need a dinner menu for this week. Can you come up with 5 things? I'll make the list, I'll do the shopping, but I need you to make the menu. Like, I'm over this for this week.
Yeah.
I take more time where I trust him to be alone with the kids than I used to. I just do a lot less micromanaging and a lot more like equal parenting or unburdening myself of the mental load.
Mhm. I love that. Yeah, I mean, feeding children is
Oh
quite
my God.
possibly the most relentlessly like roll the boulder up the hill every week, hope for the best. Like it is, getting all of your kids to eat something that they liked this week but not this week. And
Yep.
then, and then you're like I am totally the person, like I could eat whatever the kids eat. Like I could eat like a 5-year-old for the rest of my life.
Totally.
I don't care. I have no like culinary aspirations. I love to go out to dinner and like that's wonderful, but like the effort required to feed people is like, that's one of those like, haha, you became a parent. Now we're going to tell you all the things we didn't tell you before. Like feeding human beings is like living at the zoo, and it's just
Yeah.
unending.
The amount of times I have said to my husband, can't we just have Soylent for dinner? Like, give
Yeah.
him Ensure. I can't deal.
Yeah. No, it's the like things change so quickly. You know, we're sometimes it's nugget shape, like whatever. I don't want to throw any of my kids under the bus like in the moment, but like sometimes I'm like, what? Or the conversation of like sometimes it is just easier to make a pot of macaroni and cheese alongside everything else. And it's this
Totally.
like the kids like they can eat whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's just not where my head's at. Like, I'd rather spend 5 more minutes making a box of macaroni so that I know that we can sit down and like have a meal together.
Yeah.
But that conversation, we'll call it that, we'll put a fresh like sprig of mint on there. That conversation around how to come up with a grocery list, meal planning, all of that stuff is bananas.
Yeah. And we just switched our sons to a new school where we now have to provide lunch, which we never
Mm.
had to do before.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's like there's making dinner, cleaning up from dinner, putting kids to bed. And then there's the whole, like, I don't know if it's the third shift, the fourth shift, the fifth shift of
Yeah.
packing lunches and cleaning the lunch boxes and the whole thing.
I will tell you, every single year on the last day of school, I am like levitating at the idea that I don't have to pack a lunch at 6:30 in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning for like many months.
Yep.
They are still going to eat lunch. It's not like we just like
Yeah.
lunch is off the table. But like something about getting up in the morning and looking at a row of lunch boxes and being like, oh God, I got to fill all these containers.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
and then you make the same thing and then it comes back and your kids don't eat it. This is a very long tangent. I apologize. But
No,
like,
you're good.
oh,
Well, I unlocked this hack for myself as someone who's new to packing lunches, if people are interested. My son started a new school. He's 4.5. He was very nervous. So the first week I was writing a little, like drawing a little stick figure, whatever, writing a little note, leaving it in the lunchbox. Well, major parenting mistake because that set a precedent that now there's a note every day in his lunch. And I was like, well, I'm not dealing with this every day. So I made like 24 or so. Like one night after he went to bed, I just sketched, did a couple doodles and notes and whatever, made about 24 of them, and I laminated them. And so
Smart.
now every morning I've just been pulling out from my secret drawer a little laminated note that he brings back home just because he naturally was doing that anyway. And so I never have to write a note again. But I have them. And so I can feel like I'm doing him a solid, but I took a lot of that mental work out for myself.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great
thanks.
idea. I am not going to do that. I am fully not going to ever do that.
Totally.
But I 100% appreciate the non-Pinteresty, like performative, actually like meeting your kid where they're at, but also not being like, I have to sit down and do an interpretive sketch of how my kid's lunchbox period is going to go.
Yeah.
I love that.
No, this is like, I drew a star and I was like, you're a star.
Yes. Yes, you are. You are a star. You keep that one for yourself.
You shine
Forget
bright. Yeah.
How many star metaphors can we have? And love metaphors. Oh my gosh, I love that. But I do, it's that piece of like, like a hard stop check in, like, oh my God, am I just exerting all of these things in all of these different directions? And why? Like you get into that, like, why? But why am I doing this? Do I do this because I want to do this? Do I do this because I should do this, or someone's telling me, or like I want it all to make sense. I've talked about this before. I lost a parent a couple years ago, little over 2 years ago, and it was very abrupt. And it was one of those moments where I was like, okay, so like that's a lot, when you move into like you move down the food chain of like generations.
Yeah.
And then it was those periods of like, wait, I don't really want to do this, and this anymore. Or like, I am exerting so much energy into the machine of living my life that I'm not enjoying these parts of my life.
Yep.
And if I had a job, I probably would have quit it then. Like if I had a corporate job, I work for myself. So like, I can quit my job every day, but I still get up and I go back to work in the morning and I'm like, oh, you again? Myself in the mirror. But if I had, I can totally see why that would have been top of the list
Yeah.
because it's just this big swing.
And it's also, I mean, there's also a lot of power in that, though, to then say, this is a moment I get to make some choices. Because it is really overwhelming. You're right. It's like a lot. And so much of loss feels like a loss of power. You don't choose who dies, when, how, any of that. But you can choose to engage with what that opens up for you. There's going to be plenty of people who are going to lose someone and they're not going to change a thing about their lives. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is a real opportunity when someone passes away to have those conversations with yourself, to say like, well, what do I want to do differently? What am I doing because it brings me joy or purpose or satisfaction, versus, what am I doing because that's what everyone else is doing and that's what I've been told to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like the idea that, remember the feeling of having, how many things was I doing in my life as a result of the influence of this person that was no longer there? And it was like, it's such a weird moment when you realize like, oh, like the doorbell is not going to ring anymore.
Yeah.
And like, okay, so what do you do? What do you do when you're not governed by expectations anymore? Because essentially they're all gone, right? Like somebody who is not here cannot have expectations of you. We can internalize that, but
that's actually why I think this is a kind of hot take, but I think it's really damaging or harmful to folks to say, well, your mom would have wanted you to XYZ.
Oh, yeah.
Because we don't know. And to your point, this is your opportunity now to live your life in your way. And you don't have to do things based on some elusive, sort of made up idea of what the right thing to do would be based on a person who's not even in your life anymore. Especially because at the end of the day, they would most likely just want you to do what made you feel happy and proud of yourself and satisfied, which is going to change as you grow. And they just didn't get the opportunity to see that evolution of self. And so to say like, well, your mom would have really wanted you to do this thing is such a heavy burden to put on somebody who's just trying to figure out what their life looks like when that person is no longer physically present.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's separating from that entity in whatever form they are. And, and knowing what you know about them and their understanding of you and your relationship and all of those pieces, like you're really closing all that stuff down, taking what you want out of it. And then hopefully, however you do that, whether you find someone to speak to about it or be involved in a group or whatever, have a way to like handle all of the other like loose change in that. Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much like it's like post-mortem shoulding on someone is really another level of hell, because you can't, who's gonna be like, you know what? I know exactly what they would have wanted, and like you've checked the box. You're just like adding a checkbox that's never going to be checked.
Right. And it's akin to saying like everything happens for a reason, or at least they're in a better place, or at least they're not hurting anymore. And it's that shoulding, that toxic positivity, that like trying to put a period on something that's an ellipses. Trying to make a definitive declaration about an experience that's an ongoing relationship you will have with grief for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It's so disconnecting for people, because then all that says is like, okay, well, whatever I'm feeling about this isn't valid or not safe to share. So I'm going to shut it down, and then I'm not going to ask those questions that we're talking about. I'm not going to have those conversations with myself because I've just been given the information that doing that is not the right thing to do.
Right. Yeah. And in that same vein of like, they're in a better place or they're not suffering or whatever, the idea is like, we're still centering the conversation on the person who is not there anymore versus seeing and acknowledging the person who is still there, who now has their own stuff and everything else. And then so much of what happens in grief is managing other people's interactions with you as the grieving person which is just like, that's a whole job all in itself, right? Like people are like, I don't know what to say. I just want to help, yada, yada. And you're like, now I got to manage myself around you when I can't just be sad, or I can't just be angry or whatever.
Yeah. And I think that people don't understand how much their words impact somebody who's grieving when they show up in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I just wrote an article on Substack about this because I was thinking about, I was visibly pregnant when my mom died. And during the 3 days of Shiva, so the 3 days of mourning that we had, the conversation pretty much always went like this. Someone would come up to me. I'm so sorry for your loss. When's the baby due? I'm so sorry for your loss. Are you having a boy or a girl?
Jesus.
Your mom was such a great person. Do you have a name picked out yet? And what that signaled to me was like, don't talk about this thing. I'm going to do my obligatory acknowledgement. Quick, let's move to safer ground.
Mm-hmm.
Let's avoid the hard and let's move into the joy. And for me, like we were at my mom's Shiva. You don't think that I was ready to share stories, talk about her, process some of that. Like I didn't want to talk about being pregnant. I didn't want to think about 3 months from now having a baby without my mom being here to meet him and be part of that journey. I wanted to talk about my mom. And for people to step in and just immediately shift the conversation somewhere else did such a disservice for me personally, because for the next 3 months and really the next year, I felt like I wasn't allowed to talk about grief because there was this new baby and babies are joyous and it's so loving and how special and can I see pictures? And instead of anyone being like, how does it feel to have this baby who's never going to meet your mom? People were just like, wow, what a beautiful little boy. You must be so happy. And I was like, I'm so depressed.
Both things are happening at the same time. I am both a upside down smile and a right side up smile.
Totally.
And I don't know how to bounce back and forth between those because it's exhausting. Hey, it's Ashley. When I started my business, my first business, it felt like I had two options: figure it out on my own or pay a high ticket price for a coach, and there was nothing in between. I was a beginner trying to make smart decisions without burning myself out or my savings, so I built what I wish had existed. This course is 6 clear, practical modules that take you from first decisions to launch and beyond. No fluff, just guidance, structure, and support. And no how bad do you want it, or we all have the same 24 hours in the day guilt trips. I created it to help women build lives and businesses on their own terms, not just to sell a course. Listeners can take 20% off with the code NURTURED20. For more information, go to andbothpodcast.com.
And I think that that's the experience women have in postpartum in general. Like you're not allowed to be, you're allowed, but it's kind of taboo still to be really struggling in postpartum. And there's this narrative of like, if I don't love the newborn phase, then people think I don't love my baby. Or if I think tummy time is boring, then I'm not appreciative of my kids. And those things aren't true. Like the newborn stage is really hard and you have a sack of potatoes. It's not that fun. Tummy time is really boring. And you can still love your kids and be so happy to have them and also be like, I miss being able to just go for a walk when I want or exercise the way I want or have time, have a night where I sleep through the night. Like you can do both of those things and we shouldn't be guilting people for that.
Yeah. Well, and also like layer on top, over top of all of that, I don't even recognize myself physically. Like I don't know what just transpired. I don't know anyone. I have yet to meet someone who's like, you know what? I went into the hospital and I knew exactly what was going to happen. And I knew how it was all going to go. And everything went according to plan. And then I came home and this is who I am now. And it's all that. Like you go in one door as a person and you come out the other door as a completely different person. And there's zero acknowledgement of that. I mean, You might get like a home visit. You might get like, the midwife or your OB or whatever coming in when you're in the hospital, but you see them once. They're in there every 12 minutes checking out the baby and there's testing and all of this stuff. And you're like, I actually feel like the subway ran through my entire body.
Yep.
And they're like, here's some Motrin. And you're like, that's part of the problem. But the other part is that like my mental health just skydove
Yep.
without a parachute. And I
Yep.
don't know where I'm supposed to like pick up the pieces and glue this thing back together. Because by the way, when I skydove, I took a vase with me and now it is in 1,000 pieces. And I have one eye blindfolded and you're telling me that I have to glue this all back together. But like joy, so
Right.
much joy. So much
And like
joy.
take care of myself, but I have to feed the baby for 2 hours and my insides are falling out and I'm sweating profusely and like it takes me 45 minutes to change my own diaper. And by the way, like I also have a toddler at home. I will never forget when my second son was born. They told me not, I had a vaginal birth, so there was no like surgery to recover from. But they were like, "Don't pick up your son for 6 weeks." I was like, "What? In what world am I not picking up my toddler for 6 weeks? Like, send somebody to my house then, because that's not happening." I remember 3 days postpartum, we were at the playground. I'm like schlepping a bike. You know, it's like, that's just what it is. And they're like, "Oh, you hurt? Yeah, that's normal."
Yeah, that's normal. And you're like, but you wonder why. You wonder why women's health in general, like in the industry for women's health is exploding, right? Because we're talking about this stuff. The funding is now coming through, the research, the products, all of those pieces. Because enough women, just like grief, enough women came together and were like, I sweat like it's raining out of my body all day long. And someone was like, you too? Oh, you too? Oh, you too. Is this normal? Is this what's supposed to happen?
Right.
One person says, I've tried this. This is how I'm dealing with this, yada, yada. And then we move into the science-based portion of the event. And then all of these things come about and communities get created and platforms and products. And now all of a sudden it's not, I'm sitting in the room, in my kid's room in the dark, sweating at 3 a.m. thinking that like I might explode because I am a volcano of a human. Now it's like, oh, this is something that I know is going to happen. And I can do the elephant walk of the people before me and say, this is okay. This is a lot, but it's okay. And I think that's what I love about the conversations around grief and the light that's being shone on it in a way that leads to development and leads to progress and leads to like, this is a part of life that we can not run towards, but that we don't have to run away from so far.
Yeah. I mean, I have long joked that grief needs a better spokesperson because that's really what happened in menopause and perimenopause. There were a lot of people with big platforms and big voices who came out and have shared that they are struggling or they're on hormone therapy or whatever it is that's helped really bring attention and spotlight to the conversation around that life stage. Grief, we have Anderson Cooper. He's great. Literally love him. But if there were more people with a bigger platform and a higher visibility who were having those same conversations about grief and loss, that are having them about miscarriage, about perimenopause, menopause, the conversation, again, to your point, like it will get bigger. It's just that right now we don't have those voices. And I feel like we're kind of waiting, but there's like this guerrilla momentum building in people on the ground, people like me. There are death doulas. There are, just other grief advocates out there who are really starting to have that conversation in a bigger way. And it's a ripple because everyone has experienced grief or will experience grief. And so it's like a numbers game. Really, it's just like when enough people hear the message and they connect it to their own lives, you start to see that it's bigger than me and my loss in my house by myself.
Yeah.
And maybe there is something we can do differently than we've done before.
Yeah. And we move to a space where there's less, not shame, but there's less guilt and there's less expectation around hiding and things like that. And so it becomes less scary, right? It's like you don't talk about the monsters under the bed because if you do, then they're real.
Right.
It's such a great opportunity to say, we are all not talking about this, but we're all not doing ourselves a solid. We're not doing our kids a solid. We're not doing other people around us a solid. And so how do we if we at least just start talking about it, it doesn't mean, and I think too, what comes on that is that we do this comparison to other people. It's like, well, how my parent passed or how this person passed is like there's like a level of trauma in hierarchy that happens, and people are like, well, at least I didn't have that, right? Like at least I
Yes.
got a couple of weeks or I got a couple of months, or like this was just a long thing. And then that's when you pull in the person on the other side who's like, at least they're not suffering anymore. And you're
Right.
like, what?
Right. Well, I think that there's this subconscious fear that grief is contagious.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why people so quickly, like you say someone passed away, and the first thing they often ask is how, is
Hmm.
because you're doing this very quick, almost instinctual calculation of what's my risk of that happening to me. And
Yeah.
like, do I need to be afraid of this now coming into my life? And so we don't talk about it because it makes us nervous of like almost willing it into our own lives. But, I think I will never forget. I think it was 3 months after my mom died. And somebody said to me, everybody loses a parent. Like, this isn't that big a deal, relative to what can happen. Like, everyone will lose a parent.
As they're sitting in the car with their mom and their dad's in the back seat, they're like, this happens to everyone.
Right. And
Like,
I was like, that like really messed me up because I was like, ugh, this does happen to everyone. Like, why is this so hard for me? To your point, it got into this like comparison game. Like other people lost their mom or their dad at 10 or 21 or, some tragic thing. And here I am 37 and like got to support. Like it really made me doubt my feelings and my experience. And eventually I talked to someone who is like pretty well known in the grief space. And she was like, thank God that some people don't let it go,
mhm.
because then we would never have the conversation. And so, yes, it will happen to everyone, but that doesn't mean that we don't need support. It just means that there's more ways for us to feel connected about this very isolating experience. And the fact that you are so impacted by it is a gift, because then you can go out and help the people who are hiding it because they feel like this happens to everybody. They don't need to feel like that because you
Mhm.
can be the one who says like, yeah, it does. And I found it to be very challenging and it sucked.
Yeah. I think too, like there's some ownership, and that I think some of this is relative to like how a parent passes, but there's some ownership that gets laid on people that doesn't belong to them, but that there's, because we don't have these conversations, we continue to like, I guess this is me, like I guess I get to pick up this baggage and carry it along. I have shared before, my dad died by suicide,
Yeah.
and the overwhelming number of people who like somehow it's like somehow like I was supposed to have some sort of like shame feeling around this. Like
Mm,
they like didn't want to talk about it because to your point, like people are saying like, oh well, what happened? Like tell me all the circumstances around that. And it's like, first of all, no, and
right.
second of all, also no.
Right.
But you get into this space of people are like, oh, like I said to my husband, great. I was 39. I was like, great, 39. I'm the freaking suicide kid. And
Right.
he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I'm 39. I'm a grown adult. Like I have 4 of my own kids, but now I'm the one who's got the dad who killed himself.
Right.
Great. Now I got to like handle this."
Right.
And so for
You're like, I don't
me,
need this.
yeah, like I don't need this. I'm trying to pack those damn lunches, all right? I am not trying to do all of this. But for me, like the way that I've always talked about it since I got a phone call is like this was not my decision and I don't bear any of the responsibility for this decision. And
Right.
the fact that people will say, you know, how are you? And I'm like, I'm good. Like, I'm not like hiding in my house because this happened.
Right.
And there's this, it's like this idea of like, it's okay for some things to like be talked about. And this, it's like, it's still a loss. It's still very sudden. And it's still all of these
Yeah.
parts and pieces that went into it. But it doesn't make one better or one worse.
I was just leading a workshop yesterday and someone was sharing about having a miscarriage. And she said
Mm.
something like, well, and I know that's not the same as losing your mom, but something, something. And I was like, you don't need to qualify your experience here.
Yeah.
that was a real loss for you. That elicited real grief experiences for you. That's valid because it's what you felt and it's what happened. I don't think that my loss is worse than yours or your loss is harder than mine. Like, grief is grief. And I think, like, to bring it even just to the conversation of what's happening in corporate America, the fact that you see policies that are like 3 days for aunts and uncles, 5 days for spouses or children, who are you to tell me, who means something to me? Who are you to decide who I consider family, who, I'm going to mourn? It's not really our job to decide like what grief is okay and what grief is not okay. It's just our job to say grief is out there and we need to create a better environment for it to exist instead of feeling like we need to control it either as mourners or as people who are receiving somebody in their moment of grief.
So one of the things that I talk a lot about in my job is about this idea of flock-based care, because my kids did a family tree project at school this year. And while I love this, pause for dramatic effect, I think that it is not reflective of the way that relationships and the way that influences are, because they come into our world and are a part of our world. So my kids have people in their lives that they do not share genetic information with, right? They're not blood relatives. So this year they said, we're going to do this family tree project, bring in this person, this person, this person, whatever. I just sent in other people too. And I was
God,
like,
I love that.
I don't know what you want to do with this. Like, I think it's a shrub. I don't think it's a tree anymore. It is a shrub.
It's a field of wildflowers.
It is a field of wildflowers. Whatever it is you want to be, like something that is a multi-stem situation. If you want to do your genealogy, that's one thing. But if you want to talk about the people that have the impact on your life, like if you have an uncle that stepped in as in that father figure role, that person doesn't get a 72-hour mourning period. That person might get 20 years.
Right.
And it's that idea of like, there's a formula for everything in corporate, right? There's a formula for time off and there's a formula for return on investment and blah, 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 blah. And that just makes everything so stale and unforgiving. And, you never want to feel like a number, but that's how it begins.
Oh, 100%. And it just does such a disservice to where we are culturally. Like, people are really struggling to find their village, as they say.
Yeah.
And then when you do find your village, we don't have the infrastructure to support what it means to have a family dynamic that looks different than the prescribed family dynamic. It's not really that different from them saying, like, breastfeed your baby and come back to work. You get 2 weeks off work. Like, if you want one, you need to have the infrastructure to support the other.
Yeah.
And part of that is loosening the restrictions and definitions on what we think is like the right way to do literally anything. Stop telling people how to feed their kids, how to mourn, how to build family, how to access support. Let people make those choices and just build the scaffolding that allows them to do that.
Yeah. Let's build the flock, because
Totally.
nothing looks that way anymore. Or the different relationships that we have. Like I know people who their best friend in the world, they've been their best friend in the world for 30 years. They live, 2 blocks down the street, and that person would drop everything for them. And they've got a relative that couldn't be bothered,
Right.
and it's all of that. So like, how does that relative get a chance to show up at the hospital and say, I know what this person wants? It's like, well, you haven't been involved in that person's life.
Yeah.
How do we, if we're looking at these situations truly from the lens of trying to honor the person, whether that is the person who's mourning or the person who is receiving care, whatever that looks like, when we get rid of the rigidity, make it much more of a fluid situation and make it an individual case-by-case basis, then that's when things are going to make it make sense. But how do you do that in a corporate setting where as soon as you move into that individual space, it becomes kind of a free-for-all?
Yeah. And that's also where we're going to have better outcomes, where people are going to feel safer in their lives and being vulnerable and, sharing about what's going on, or going even like to the doctor if they're afraid because the person who they live with and love doesn't have power of attorney to make decisions on their behalf. Like we're going to see better outcomes when people are more empowered to make choices about their lives than the systems we have today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I love it. I love it. So how is everything going? Like how is it? Tell me
My
about the
life,
grief
the
space.
business.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like the grief coaching, like how are you finding people are responding to it?
Yeah, it's going well. I think, this whole conversation has sort of been a thesis on it is really hard to get people in corporate to see what they're not seeing. But once you are able to make that emotional connection with people, sort of what we talked about earlier, the door opens up a lot wider
Mm-hmm.
and the conversation becomes a lot more fluid and a lot more engaging. One thing that I've been doing recently in my business, which I've been really excited about, is I've been investing more of my time in creating some physical products to help people actually move through their own grief. So I just launched a grief workbook that has journal prompts, coloring pages, recipes, movement suggestions to really let people engage with the dialogue of grief in whatever way they need in the moment. I find that a lot of the support in the grief space is like, here's some cozy, fuzzy slippers. And that's well and good, but it doesn't really get you anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also in the process of making some creative morning kits, which are curated craft activities for people to help process feelings of grief and loss. Again, to answer that question that I think has come up a lot for me of where does the love go when someone dies? And you have that energy that wants to transfer somewhere. And I have found it to be so powerful to transfer it into making things with my hands and being able to look at that and, have a memory come up for me or know the intention behind what I was thinking and feeling when I made it. And I have found that shifting the conversation in that direction has felt really empowering and supportive. Yeah. And I told someone the other day, I was like, I'm raw dogging it out here. There aren't a lot of examples of folks doing what I do. And so it's a lot of trying things and you sort of finding your allies, but the people who become allies are very strong allies.
Yeah. I think that is one of the things about this conversation that I hope that people take away is this idea, especially, and not even especially depending on how this person, because I guess that would be counterintuitive to literally everything we talked about. But this idea of if you are in a caregiving position and you have a outpour of energy for however long it is, right? It could be like months, weeks, years, days, whatever it is. There's that adrenaline associated with caregiving and the cognitive piece of it, the emotional piece of it, the physical piece of it. You sort of get into another gear. And, I have seen this happen in my own family. I've seen this happen with patients and things like that is exactly what you're saying. Like you sort of hit this register and then the person passes and then you don't know how to get back down to that baseline. And I think that the hard part is when you feel like this is just the new normal. And so you run at that. And really the message is that's not sustainable. It's not ideal in the best of situations, but it's definitely not sustainable in the long run. So how can you help someone apply the brake so that you can do it in a way that is productive? Because I think that when my grandmother, she had breast cancer and she was sick for many, many years. And it was this idea of when it was coming to the end of her life, I had said to my family, you have to have someone help you slow down because no one will help you speed up. People just give you things to do and they give you expectations and they give you assignments and tasks and all of that stuff. But then it's great job. Thanks you so much. You have to find a way to apply the brake in a way that's productive and helpful. And like you're talking about, connecting, slowing down, recentering all of those pieces, because otherwise, a train can't run at 200 miles an hour forever. You're going to crash into something.
That's so beautifully said that no one will help you speed up. They just throw it at you and you do it.
Yeah.
That's so beautifully said. And that's exactly right. It's like people who train for a marathon often talk about after the race, they experience sort of the post-marathon blues or the post-marathon depression. because you spent so much physical and mental energy working towards something or, caregiving. And then when the person passes away or after you run the race, that huge part of your life stops instantly. And then you're left with a lot of time and a lot of pent up emotion and energy that you have nowhere to put it. And that's where I think it gets into a lot of doom scrolling, a lot of like couch rotting. And there's certainly space and time and place for that. Absolutely. But there's also a way to do that in partnership with finding ways to turn it down slowly and give yourself the opportunity to process some of the stuff you went through without it being so consuming where you feel like you have to cry every day in therapy and like talk about it. And sometimes you just need to shift into a different part of your brain to feel into it without being consumed by it and then turn that temperature down a little.
Yeah. And I think that's the hard part is that once you slow down, if you don't have time to process everything you're going through in the moment when that person is still here, when they're gone, then it's like, if I keep going like that, then I don't have to deal or I don't have to address or I don't have to all of those things. But, the cool thing about life is that there's a lot of scorekeeping that happens,
Totally.
whether you want it to or not. And your
I was going to
body
say that's when you like get the flu, break your leg, like your body will eventually catch up with you.
Yeah, it's like, no, you are actually going to sit down and we are going to make it not possible for you to do things because right now, not working for us.
Totally.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think that, the thing about the last couple of years, especially like with moving away from the pandemic, when like everything just turned into a giant like sandwich press of life, is that because we were all in the space of whatever it was, whether it was grief, whether it was caregiving, whether it was career, whatever the thing was, everything was so much all the time that there was no way to really hide all of those parts and pieces of it. And so things came to the forefront. And because everyone was in a space where we live in a world where everything gets shared online, we have no internal monologue anymore.
Yeah.
None. And so because that happens, then things start to pop up. And so like when you say like my algorithm feeds me this stuff, it's because that exists in the ecosystem and now you're trying to connect those dots. But what I love is that especially moving into the space of like corporate and how things work is that you're really creating the opportunity for people to be seen as individual and not as a number in a space where they still have to be a number to a certain degree, like in a bigger corporate ecosystem, but that how are you connecting with somebody so that they don't feel like I am like the mouse in office number 462 and nobody cares. Like somebody is seeing me for who I am and what I'm going through, which I think is really impressive.
And just giving people the chance to be both. Like, I think that's the thing that really struck me when I was working in corporate and navigating grief was like, I can be a professional and have this really rich personal experience if you create systems that allow me to be. It didn't have to be that I chose one or the other. There's a lot of area to create space for people to be both. And I think the more we do that, like the richness of my experience taught me a lot that is really powerful in a business setting, in a communication setting, in empathy, in so many of these like master classes of life that could have really benefited my organization if I had been able to exist in both spaces at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the more we give people opportunity to bring what's going on in their lives and the lessons they're learning and the things that they're experiencing into the other areas of our lives in a safe and productive way, we're going to start to see more tides change, more things, come to light, more creation, because there's just more input into the system.
Here's hoping. I've got my fingers crossed because that sounds amazing. Yes, sign me up for that.
Yeah, totally.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah.
Connect with you and hear more about what you're working on.
Yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn at Sarah Kagan, or my website is KeriaHcoaching.com, KERIAH coaching.com. And if you're on the gram, I'm at Grief Coach Sarah.
Love it. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Well, I will put all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Ashley, thank you so much. I had such a lovely time chatting.
Yeah, we just keep this going. We'll just carry on.
And we only have 2 more lunches to make this week.
Mm.
So we're almost at the weekend.
And my kids had a delay today, so I didn't have to make the lunch at 6. I got to make it at 8:30. I'm telling you, game changer.
Yeah.
Small miracles on hump day.
Amazing.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Talk to you soon.